How about Deacon Hill? 49%, Mark. 13 games played, 49%. It's a team that won the Big Ten West. I mean, think about it. So what? Here's a good follow-up question to this discussion because we're talking about it. What does a 60%? And I'm not saying, again, not implying that it's the end-all stat, but you tell me, Mark. What does, with the guys they have coming back? Yeah, the schedule's a little bit more difficult, but not as difficult as it could have been and will be moving forward. The question I have is, what does a 60% passer this year do to the offense and to this team as a whole?
It's huge. It is huge. It doesn't sound like it, but when you go from 48 to 50% range to 60, and you're throwing the ball 22, 24 times a game, something in that range. Most winning games, I would guess, for Iowa against good opponents where they can't just sit on the ball. And I understand that they have been able to do that a few times against some decent opponents like Wisconsin last year. But probably needing to throw the ball 20 to 24 times a game. You go from completing 11 of 24 to more like 15 or 16. It's 4 completions that could be of any variety. It could be a 3-yard completion that doesn't mean much, but they could be over the course of a closely contested football game. They're typically going to be 4 or 5 throws there that make the difference between punting and keeping the ball and advancing the ball, or breaking off for a big play and scoring points. So absolutely. Look at the pass completion percentage last season in college football. Oregon completed 77% of their passes. And we had 6 teams in college football complete over 70% of their passes. And we had 77 teams complete at least 60% of their passes.
So here's 77. Brian Ulrich in the chat. I don't know that I can debate this. I'm not some offensive coordinator and some statistician as it relates to football, but he says rather have 57% on completions with 7.5 yards per attempt than 63% with 6 yards per attempt. My only response, again, without debating it, I'm not saying he's right or wrong. Why not have both? Why not have 63% with 7.5 yards per attempt? Mark, go back and look at those numbers you just showed. There are a lot of teams on that list that had both. Like all those teams that were well over 60% completion. Also, a lot of them, I think all of them that I saw, look at the numbers. I mean, yards per attempt. Is there anybody under 7.5 on there? So, okay, it's a couple of 7.3s in there. Georgia State, Middle Tennessee. But everybody's above that.
Yeah, if you're looking at the power conferences.
I mean, keep going down. How far do we go here, right? Like 7.5 is not some crazy thing to achieve. Most of
Arkansas, 7 point, and they're a bad football team.
Yeah.
Alabama, 9.5. Goodness.
I mean, I'm probably drinking everybody said I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. That's fine. That's fine. I just think these are not big bars to set. And as it relates to the bar that has been set with this offense, that I think makes a lot of people hesitant to reevaluate expectations and put faith in a guy like Tim Lester to not make a 180, but create significant progress in year one. Doc P, what he said back at 5:02 p.m., Mark in the chat, Petrus O-line and OC failed him. Yes and no. I mean, yes, I believe me. I was plenty critical of the offensive line. I was plenty critical of Brian Ferentz, obviously. However, all of it goes hand in hand. And Petrus, let's not act like Petrus was not wanted by a bunch of Power 5 schools when he left Iowa. Mark, he's a 3-year starter. How many 3-year starters at a Power 5 league team that enter the transfer portal don't have Power 5 options? I don't know that he had any Power 5 options. I actually doubt he did. Maybe he did. He goes to Utah State. Now, maybe he'll just light the world on fire. I know he's coming off a serious injury.
Utah Tech.
No, Utah State.
I thought it was Utah Tech. Why did I?
You're thinking of Deacon Hill.
Oh, Deacon Hill. Yes.
One's at Utah State, one's at Utah Tech.
Yes.
Formerly Dixie State. So, yes. Anyways, my point being, it is a collective effort to be this bad. How many times have we said that on the show? But I would think Tim Lester, not only being a better play caller, a better evaluator of quarterback play in practice, a better quarterbacks coach, a guy that's going to probably even help the wide receiver room more than maybe Iowa's last wide receiver coach did. You think about that as a non-wide receivers coach coordinator is pretty incredible to say, but I think it's feasible. All of it makes me think that the room to jump here is significant. Some people say, well, they still don't have the horses. I'm not saying they have the horses that Tim Lester wants. They still have some of the same guys that were, starters with Spencer Petras, and we see that other teams weren't, involved in bidding wars for Spencer Petras or Deacon Hill, but he's going to get more out of them. So I think significantly more out of them than you ever saw out of Brian Ferentz. And this is going to sound like I'm being very mean, and I'm not, because it's business, right? It's not got anything to do with personal stuff. But I have as much confidence in Tim Lester to get everything he can out of his guys. And on the flip side, had as much confidence in Brian Ferentz to get as little as possible out of the talent he had, whether the talent was great or not very good. Charlie Jones being a perfect example. We saw it on both ends of the spectrum. Players that aren't real talented, he ain't going to get much out of them. They're not going to become 5-star high draft picks. Like some guys at certain positions, like a Tyler Linderbaum that was probably working with Kirk in addition to whoever was at Barnett. I guess it wasn't Barnett then. Whoever the offensive line coach was at the time, Polasek, you're going to have those diamonds in the rough. But as it relates to quarterback play, it's been nothing but putrid since Brian Ferentz took over. So I expect that to change. Oh, with the exception being Nate Stanley. However, I think it's a fair thing to point out that he did begin his career with Greg Davis. And although I've been critical of Greg Davis for different reasons, I do think Stanley starting out with Greg Davis helped him. And he just was a talented guy with some excellent tight ends that fit into the Iowa system. We did not see some monumental progress in his fundamentals or just play as a whole from 2017 until 2019. Mark, I could argue he had his best year in 2017. So that is an indication to me that I'm not giving Brian Ferentz much credit for the Nate Stanley production. Yes, I can't. David says, you just can't stop bashing Petras. I'm just saying he went to Utah State. He is not some victim. I'm so tired of the victim. I'm not saying David's doing that, but I hear so many people that try to make Spencer Petras the victim. As Don Patterson has said dozens and dozens of times on my show, Spencer Petras was part of the problem. Just like Brian Ferentz was part of the problem. Could Petras have been coached better? Yes. But had someone else not been here, it had someone other than Brian Ferentz, etc., been coaching that offense at that point, it's either likely that A, they wouldn't have brought him in, or B, they wouldn't have continued starting him year after year after year. So I'm just saying Iowa's last two starting quarterbacks have went on to Utah State and Utah Tech. And the guys who haven't played have went to the likes of, let's see, I can't even think of some of the schools. Deuce Hogan was a walk-on at Kentucky, I don't even know where Deuce Hogan is now. Carson May went to Coffeyville, then transferred to Wyoming. Now I think he's at some other G5 school or Fs. I think he went to an FCS school. Alex Padilla got buried on the SMU depth chart. Like, they obviously were not recruiting well. All right. They obviously did not recruit well. They didn't develop well, but they obviously did not recruit well either.
By contrast, I was collecting a list while you were going through that because that's a great point. By contrast, Iowa's competition in the Big Ten during the last couple of years. Look at quarterbacks who were decent quarterbacks, who were in the running for a starting position, but maybe somebody else was better. And look at the type of schools they've gone to. Gavin Wimsatt at Rutgers. Couldn't win the job, apparently. He's off to Kentucky.
As a scholarship player.
Oh, absolutely.
Not as a walk-on.
Ethan Kalkumanis. Why he left Minnesota, we don't know. Maybe this incoming guy from New Hampshire's better, but he landed at Rutgers. We also have Michigan State, Peyton Thorne. He leaves Michigan State. Was Peyton Thorne a great quarterback? No, capable quarterback. He goes to Auburn, becomes the starting quarterback at Auburn. I thought of a few other ones along the line. Cade McNamara can't win the starting quarterback at Michigan because they've got a 5-star, but he's able to land at Iowa.
Yeah, he actually this more. He lost the starting position after taking that team to the Big Ten championship and a college football playoff berth. And I appreciate the dialogue from David. He says, "I feel bad for the young man. He got sold a bill of goods. Could have went somewhere else and done well." So I do appreciate the dialogue, David. I'm not trying to bash you. The problem with that statement is nobody is keeping these. Like, this is the era of the portal. If he wanted out, he could have left. I just think we're playing the kid as a victim. Yeah, okay, if he got sold a bill of goods, first of all, Iowa was, as far as offers, it's not like he had Alabama and Michigan State and all these great places on his offer list. I think he was initially committed to Oregon State before flipping to Iowa. He could have left. At any point in his career, he could have left. Now, I could also say, Mark, why would you leave? When you are the starter in spite of terrible quarterback play year after year after year after year after year, why would you leave? That was his decision not to leave. If he was some talented guy who was sold a bunch of nonsense, Mark, why wouldn't he in 2021 or in 2022 have just said, I'm out. I'm going someplace else. Like, look at this big arm I've got. I'm going to go play someplace that can protect me, give me better skill position players. I'm going to light the world on fire. He didn't do that. I think partially because it's likely Spencer Petras knew, or people around him knew, that was not going to work well. So if he wanted to play Power 5 football, he's going to have to stay at Iowa and be a part of an offense that was bottom barrel of Power 5 football.
Who here thought that Graham Mertz did an outstanding job at Wisconsin?
That's a great example.
And he's the starting quarterback at Florida.
Great example. So maybe, listen, if Petras goes to Utah State, lights the world on fire, I'll give him credit. But it ain't like Graham Mertz going to Florida and doing it. But I don't think Petras is going to go to Utah State and light the world on fire. He does that. I will eat a couple bites of crow. Not completely. I don't think he's going to do that. But it's certainly not going to be, again, Charlie Jones. Go back to some of these other positions. These guys, I know he's an easy one to bring up, but other position guys who weren't really producing. Now, he was a special teams outlier, but he goes on somewhere else and is just a breath of fresh air at a Power 5 school. So anyways, that's my soapbox. I'm glad we're having these conversations. Isaac says that Hogan is now at New Mexico. So there you go. So New Mexico, that is FBS.
Yes.
Oh, good for him. Good for him. I'm assuming he is on scholarship in New Mexico. I would hope that he's on scholarship for New Mexico.
And the last one I'll throw out there, Will Levis could not earn the starting job at Penn State and went to Kentucky. Was a second-round draft pick in the NFL draft.
Now, some of the naysayers there would say Penn State's a different class, but I think the best one you brought up was Graham Mertz, because people associate Iowa oftentimes with Wisconsin. So, and Petras and Mertz, their careers lined up. Remember the game in 2022, the game in Kinnick, and Mertz just looked. Mertz looked worse than Petras in that game. Now, maybe he was dealing with some injury, but it was unbelievable to watch that. How bad he looked. And I thought, there's no way anybody in the Power 5 wants him. He goes to a SEC school with national championship history and plays really well. That really did surprise me. But there are smart people who are working at these universities that are evaluating these kids, because you just went off numbers. You ain't going to get much with Graham Mertz, but the Gators liked him, and good for them.
Graham Mertz, I don't know if this statistic held out, but with a couple games left in the season, and I believe he accomplished this, set an SEC completion percentage record. Completed 74% of his passes.
That's incredible. Shows you again, it's not as simple as saying, well, he had better skill position talent, but that's probably part of it. guessing the disparity between skill position talent, specifically wideouts from Wisconsin and Florida, was just so stark. And Isaac made the correction. Apparently, Hogan is at New Mexico State.
Okay,
So,
the Aggies. They've got a good program. Jerry Kill was just there, of course. He retired following.
And they are also
the game.
FBS. They are also FBS. So, yeah.
The 22 Wisconsin game at Kinnick. I'm not coming up with really what kind of game that was. I assume.
What kind of game do you think it was?
Yeah, I'm sure it was played below 415, but it's not coming to mind what kind of. Like, I can't really envision
like
anything happening, anything specific.
It's like a couple of overweight children fighting over a Little Debbie. Like that's what that game was. Like nobody really ever got off the ground. There was never any like grand prize at the end. It was a couple of. I mean, Iowa did end up. It's amazing that Iowa finished 8-5 that year with the as bad as it was. It could have been worse had they maybe Brian Ferentz had they lost that game. Maybe he would not have been retained. You wonder what would have happened at 6-6 or even 5-7. You wonder if maybe the OC search would have started a year earlier, but we'll never know.
Iowa scored 10 points in the fourth quarter to pull away 24-10.
Yeah, I believe one of them was a pick six by Cooper DeJean. The other one was set up by the other score was set up by Cooper DeJean on a punt return that took him like inside the 20 or inside the 10. I'm just saying that's legitimate. So
that's great. Of course it was. Of course that's what happened.